Do you realize how much better your team would be if you had Kareem Hunt, Drake May, J.K. Dobbins stashed and ready to go so you didn't have to beat the waiver wire? Well, today I'm bringing you 10 plus waiver wire targets that you need to be adding before week 8 fantasy football. If you are one of the 82% of people that are not subscribed currently watching this, hit that like, hit that subscribe button, answering all your start sit questions all season long. So starting off with the players that should already be stashed onto your roster: Ray Davis, Quentin Johnston, Pop Douglas, Xavier Legette, Antonio Gibson, Michael Wilson Jr., and Sean Tucker. Not going to talk about these guys in general, but I do prefer these guys over the guys I'm going to be talking about a little bit later in the video. So I just wanted to bring them up, that if these guys are somehow still available in your league, definitely make sure that you go roster these guys. Now, starting off with my first player that you should be stashing ahead of week 8 fantasy football, it's going to be Gabe Davis for the Jacksonville Jaguars. In big play, Gabe signed that huge extension with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and right now he is only 26% rostered in sleeper leagues because all season long he's only scored double-digit fantasy points once, which was in week 6 versus Chicago. Now, when we're looking at this overall depth chart, the thing that we're clearly going to see is Gabe Davis is the third wide receiver. We got Brian Thomas Jr. and Christian Kirk getting a lot more of this work than a guy like big play Gabe. But the part that we do like about big play Gabe, I know he's a clear X, kind of playing the Marvin Harrison Jr. role, the Marcus Valdes-Scantling role, where he's just going deep. We're looking at him the last few weeks though: 69, 69, 78, 79, 76, 95, 94% snap share. So Gabe Davis is absolutely getting on the field. The thing that is hindering him, of course, is the lack of targets because he's competing with some pretty good wide receivers in Christian Kirk and Brian Thomas Jr. When we look at the big week 6 game versus Chicago, the reason that it happened is because he had 8 total targets. So I know it's a little bit more of reach. We're getting into the back end of the season when we need guys that can potentially pop off, and there's nobody that can pop off more than a big play Gabe. I understand Trevor Lawrence is throwing him the ball. I hear you as you guys are thinking of all the negatives that are potentially out there with big play Gabe. But when we're looking at the end of our bench, I want guys that can absolutely skyrocket up fantasy football rankings, and Gabe Davis is one of those type of players. Go be adding some big play Gabe onto your roster. The next guy that I believe you need to be stashing for week 8 fantasy football, it's gonna be Greg Dortch for the Arizona Cardinals. In the same way that we are a little bit depressed about how Marvin Harrison Jr. has been playing, Greg Dortch really since week 1 has not had a double-digit type scoring event for himself either. He's the wide receiver 72, rostered in only 8% of leagues. So this one may be a little bit harder for you guys to see, but he still did find the end zone in that week 7 game. He's getting on the field. It's been up and down in regards to how much production he actually gets. We look at the overall snap share this whole season. It's been pretty much like every other week, like 61, 35, 66, 73, 41% snap share, then a 62% snap share, then a 30% snap share. It kind of just depends on the game, how things are going for Greg Dortch. I love me some Greg Dortch. I think he provides a lot of upside value on the back end of your bench. Now, the part that we do need to talk about with Greg Dortch, that Zay Jones, he was a non-factor in week 7, hasn't really been a factor all season, but we do have to acknowledge that Zay Jones is going to be coming back at some point. So if you're going to be arguing against Greg Dortch, of course, that's something that could be happening. But I do like Greg Dortch as a stash. Like I said, only 8% rostered. So he's definitely available in your league. Love me some Greg Dortch going down the line. The next guy that I believe you need to be stashing is going to be Taj Spears for the Tennessee Titans. And I'll be clear, a lot of you guys watch this video and you guys think, oh my gosh, he's going in order. He's picking Greg Dortch over a guy like a Taj Spears. All of this is team dependent in regards to which waiver wire stash you need. So if you have a question about your team, ask me down below. I'll get to it. Taj Spears did not play week 7 versus Buffalo, only RB 53 on the season, 46% rostered. So I like to bring you guys stashes that are underneath 50% rostered over here on Sleeper. Now, Taj Spears was dealing with a hamstring. He's still questionable for this Sunday. I understand that the Tennessee Titans offense has looked terrible. No quarterback play. Tony Pollard's been the clear bell cow. As we have seen with this fantasy football season, it has been one of constant injuries and constant heartbreak with our players. And I'm not saying that I want Tony Pollard to get injured, because knock on wood, I have plenty of Tony Pollard that I need onto my teams. The part that I do want to talk about is Taj Spears has been an efficient level running back when given the opportunities. Even with the 45, 33, 37, 42% snap share before the week 5 bye, he still had 2 games where he totaled over 10 fantasy points in full PPR. Taj Spears is one of these guys that I want to be adding to the end of my roster that has high level upside as a running back. The next running back that I talked about last week, the week before, and I'm continuing to talk about him each and every freaking week, it is going to be Trey Benson. Now, Trey Benson was active for Monday Night Football and put up what we would like to call a straight 0-pointer, a straight goose egg. Did not get into the game for any rushing attempts, no receiving, played on 7% 100% of the snaps, which was just special teams. Now, Benson was listed questionable with an illness. They decided to play him. He was, of course, if you risked it and played him, did not look good, but he is 24% owned in sleeper leagues. And so going forward, Trey Benson, like we said, drafted as a top 3rd round pick, high level of explosion. This whole Marvin Harrison Jr. Cardinals offense dilemma, James Conner has looked good. And even in this last Monday Night Football game, put up 17 fantasy points. Now, James Conner pretty much has a dominating part of the snap share, 84, 28, 79% the last 3 weeks. But as we have talked about before, James Conner has not been able to put together a fully healthy season in his entire career. We're talking about a guy historically that has played 13 to 14 games a season. So when he misses time, because he will miss time based on previous years, I want to have Trey Benson stashed onto my roster. We'll move on to the next guy that you should be stashing. It's going to be Jalil McLaughlin for the Denver Broncos. And Jalil. We thought Jalil had breakout level potential, almost like a Devon based on what he did last year coming off the waiver wire. But Javonte has really started to step up for this Broncos team. So if you drafted Javonte, congratulations. You're feeling really great about it. These last few weeks, 3, 4, 11 fantasy points, only had between a 22 and 37% snap share. He's the RB47 on the year, and he's only 19% rostered. Now, the part of the Broncos offense has been that Bo Nix has been super efficient on the ground, almost like a mini level Konamiko quarterback, getting around 30 to 40 rushing yards per game, which has really hindered and limited the running back's ability, especially the backups when we're talking post Javonte Williams, to get any sort of run. But I do think Jalil McLaughlin, based on his speed, based on the way that we're looking at the schedule coming down the pike for the Denver Broncos, we got Carolina this week, we got Baltimore, we got Kansas City, we got Atlanta. It's going to be some pretty high scoring games, and a guy like Jalil McLaughlin with that catching out of the backfield upside makes it super exciting for me to kind of have him stashed. Listen, I understand Javonte's kind of taken over the main snap share. I do think Jalil McLaughlin is worth the stash. Now, the next stash that we're going to be talking about is his teammate Aeris Esme, and there's a lot of you guys that tune into this video that you guys are big believers in Aeris. Big Aeris, he handled 5 total carries against the Saints in that win, 9% snap share, 5 carries for 29 yards, but he did lose a fumble. So I do want to just kind of talk about Aeris, that I'm worried that the fumble, especially with this depth chart behind Jalil, behind Javonte, it's Aeris, it's Michael Burton, it's Tyler Batty. I'm a little bit worried about Aeris Esme. So I'm putting him in the video. If you're in a super deep league, he's 6% rostered, but I know I wanted to address it because a lot of you guys are always like, I mention any sort of Broncos and you're like, Aeris Esme. We got a fan base of Aeris Esme fans here on the channel. I'm probably staying away, but I would understand if you want to stash him because he's a big bodied, you think he has the upside to be a top quality level running back, but I do not see it. The next guy that you should be stashing, it's going to be Cam Akers for the Minnesota Vikings. It's crazy to say that Cam Akers was dropped because he was someone of a fantasy football relevance a few weeks ago for the Houston Texans, but of course gets dropped, playing behind Aaron Jones, playing behind Ty Chandler. Now, Cam Akers is most likely locked, so this is going to be someone that you potentially might want to look at on the waiver wire for next week. I understand that CJ Ham, their fullback, is kind of getting more snaps right now than a guy like Cam Akers, but I don't think they signed Cam Akers just to eventually play third fiddle to a guy like Ty Chandler. I think Ty Chandler has been nothing of excitement that I think Cam Akers will have a shot in this overall offense at some point to be the number 2, which, like we said, if you're playing in a super shallow league, you're probably not adding Cam Akers to your team, but he is 13% rostered. I think it is valuable because we have seen him be a decent level flex level option running back for you this season in fantasy football, especially if he gets in for this Minnesota Vikings offense. All signs are up for a guy like Cam Akers. The next guy we're going to be talking about that you need to be stashing is going to be Kayshon Boutte for the New England Patriots. And Kayshon, the last 2 weeks, 83 and 83% snap share. Now, last week only had 4.3 fantasy points. The week before that had 14.9. So really, it was touchdown or bust. Now, he tops the team wide receiver in snaps for this week 7 game versus Jacksonville. So we'll have to see what happens in this week 8 game. It's a hard matchup for the Patriots going up against the Jets, but I do really like Kayshon as a super deep sleeper. I know he's 2% rostered. Things are starting to look up. I know a lot of us like Jalen Polk. A lot of us like Pop Douglas. And I do believe Pop Douglas, like I said, needs to be rostered, but I think we could be talking about Kayshon Boutte really starting to push for that wide receiver 2 role next to Pop Douglas. Shout out to Jalen Polk for continuing to let us down as a fantasy football community, but hey, Kayshon might just take his place and might make us feel just okay. So if you want to get ahead of it, definitely target some Kayshon Boutte. And the last and final player we're going to be talking about today, it's going to be Devonta Vil for the Denver Broncos. In the same way, like Devon, when he got his opportunity, week 1 had 11 fantasy points. Now, he was out week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5, came back in week 6 and had 11 fantasy points. Now, in week 7 versus Indianapolis, he only played in 43% of snaps, had 3 targets for 1 reception, 20 yards, only put up 3 fantasy points. So it wasn't great at all. He's 5% roster. So this is another deep flyer. But Devonta Vil, we love him as a rookie. When we're looking at this Broncos wide receiver depth chart, it's Courtland Sutton, it's Troy Franklin, and then it's pretty much Devonta Vil and Marvin Mims fighting for the wide receiver 3 spot for this Broncos team. And so I do like the opportunity that Devonta Vil is going to be getting, especially with Bo Nix continuing to look better and better as the weeks go by. We're talking about matchups coming down the line. We love Carolina this week. Baltimore, they're going to have to throw the ball to keep in that with the tough front 7 that Baltimore plays with. Kansas City, Atlanta, Las Vegas. So I do like Devonta Vil, especially if you're needing some wide receiver help. So if you like fantasy football, if you want your questions answered all season long, hit that like, hit that subscribe button on the way to 4,000 subscribers. Check out these 2 videos if you haven't, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.